friends, including you.
Okay, you can go ahead and start.
Hi, and thanks so much for joining us today for a webinar giving an update on conservation efforts for the frosted elfin butterfly. My name is Robin. And I am the species lead out of the New York field office. Next. We'll be going over several things today, including providing a brief background on the species for those of you that are new to the frosted elfin, give you an overview of some of the efforts that have been ongoing and accomplishments to date, provide an overview of our intended focus for 2020 and perhaps into 2021, give you some options for getting involved, provide a little bit more details on our survey protocols and how to submit your data, and give you an update on several of the communications efforts that have been underway and successful. Next. Instead of just hearing from me today, we thought it would be nice for you to hear from several of us that are on Team Frosted Elfin. So you're going to hear from Becky Longnecker, Steve Fuller, and Bridget McDonald as well. And I just want to thank everyone that's been involved with this effort to date. Next. So just a little bit about the background of the frosted elfin. This is a species that we are proactively assessing its status. So it's not a species that we've been formally petitioned to list, but we are going through the assessment to determine whether or not it may warrant protection under the Endangered Species Act as a threatened or endangered species. And on our national listing work plan, we have a date where our determination is scheduled for no later than September of 2023. Next. The frosted elfin has 3 recognized subspecies. Calliophrys iris is the tan color, the largest area shown on this map. Hadros is the aqua in the southwest, and Arcis is the kind of plum or wine color in coastal South Carolina. The other things to point out in this map are the crosshatched areas, which are states or provinces where we believe that frosted elfin are extricated. And then the counties are counties where we've had some form of occurrence record, and the different colors are what we know about the host plant. Next. So the frosted elfin is all 3 subspecies, or the species as a whole. All of the larvae rely on one of 2 plant species. So either wild blue lupin, which is shown on the left, or wild indigo, shown on the right. So if you do not have either of these plant species, you will not have frosted elfin at your site. Next. The frosted elfin life cycle, just real briefly, they live for 1 year, and adults are flying right about now. So they come out in the spring. Females lay single eggs on their host plants and hatch out into larvae. The larvae go through several instars and pupate, and really pupa is the primary life form that the species occurs in throughout most of the year, at the base of host plants or just under the leaf litter under the soil. Next. Some of the examples of habitat where frosted elfin occur are oak pine barrens, oak savannas, dry oak woodlands, and also anthropogenically disturbed areas like power line cuts railways, gravel pits, and airports. Both wild lupin and indigo do well with open or mid-open canopies and are disturbance-reliant species, so some form of management is necessary to keep the host plant available for frosted elfin. Next. Some of the accomplishments to date. So in the summer, early fall of 2017, a team of us developed part 1 and 2 of a species status assessment. And so if you're not familiar with the species status assessment, basically we reviewed all the available information that we could find in the literature and spoke with experts about what do frosted elfin need and what do they have right now. So that's part 1 and part 2 of the SSA. And we prepared a draft report. We conducted partner review in fall into early winter of 2017, and we finalized that in April of 2018, and that's available on our Frosted Elfin website. Next. As a result, what we have learned is that there's a lot that we don't know about the status of the frosted elfin. That makes sense. This is a species that isn't already protected under the Endangered Species Act, and there are a lot of species that states and our partners are working on, and this is a species where we have a lot of occurrence information that is out of date, so more than 10 years old, and so we know that frosted elfin occurred at a site at some point, but we don't have a lot more information than that on most of these locations. In fact, about 80% of our sites, we did not have sufficient information to really be able to rank how well we thought those populations were doing. Next. What we were able to gather from state and federal partners and other experts were, even if we didn't know exactly how populations were doing in many cases, they did have good information on some of the sites. And they were able to tell us what things are influencing the status of those sites or populations. Those include things like very small population sizes, habitat loss and degradation from a variety of sources, whether it's land conversion for development of commercial or residential housing, succession, invasive species, incompatible vegetation management, trampling or destruction from off-road vehicles. So there's a wide variety of factors that are influencing the status of these sites, including some proactive, positive conservation efforts, whether those are focused on species like the federally listed corner blue butterfly or frosted elfin itself, or other early successional species. Next. So as a result of that SSA report and our realization that we needed to know a lot more about this species, we formed a regional frosted elfin survey management team. And so our goal was to develop survey protocols that could be implemented widely for us to get a handle on how the species is doing. So we developed the first range-wide protocols. It was a Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Geological Survey team. And there are 3 components to those protocols that Steve will go over. And he'll also touch on how you can enter the data. Next. In the spring and summer of last year, the service hired 10 at-risk species fellows to implement those protocols. As part of that, we formed local survey coordination teams. Those were primarily led by the State Natural Resource Management Agency and the local National Wildlife Refuge staff, local ES staff. Those protocols were implemented across most of the northeastern states last year. We also had some partners implement these pilot protocols in Wisconsin and Arkansas. And then in the summer and fall of last year, we compiled all that information, QA/QC'd it with the states, and we actually modified our ranking methods based on some good feedback from the people implementing the protocols. Next. So just a quick snapshot of what we were able to accomplish last year. You can see that 379 preliminary habitat assessments were accomplished, and you can see that those were, again, mostly in the Northeast with a great cluster in Arkansas and a few sites up in Wisconsin. And so of those, 88% of them confirmed that one of the 2 host plant species were present. We had a pretty cold, wet spring last year, and so in many cases we weren't able to actually confirm whether or not frosted elfin were at the site, but at least we're able to know where we need to focus additional efforts, where we still have the host plant present. Next. So how are we assessing how populations are doing? I mentioned that we updated our ranking methods, and you can find more details about this on our website, but just in brief, the things that we are considering are how many butterflies are observed, how large of an area of the host plants are present, how many subpopulations or patches are present, and how good is the habitat. And so if you have more butterflies, more host plants, more patches, and good habitat, those will result, we believe, in the highest viability sites. So the sites where frosted elfin are most likely to persist over time. Next. This is a summary of how the populations ranked out from 2019 surveys. We had 15 populations ranking as high viability or high likelihood of persisting into the future, 22 moderate, 10 of low, 168 unconfirmed. So again, there was just that cold, wet spring and more survey work is needed. And several were determined to be extirpated. Next. We can't directly compare the results from the 2018 SSA report because only a sample of sites were done in 2019, but we were able to confirm several more populations are actually a high viability than we originally thought in 2018. And we know that there are a lot of sites that are still out there, like I mentioned, that we just need to follow up and determine how well or how poorly they're doing in terms of their butterflies. Next. There's additional conservation efforts that I just wanted to mention. These are just a few of them. There are states in the Northeast that are working on a region-wide xeric habitat conservation initiative, which should benefit the frosted elfin as one of multiple species. 7 out of the 10 historically occupied states in the Northeast are actively restoring or managing habitat. New Hampshire is working on captive breeding. Delaware and Maryland are beginning to plan for some translocation efforts. And the Delaware River program has identified the frosted elfin as a priority species. Next. And now Becky will talk to us about our 2020 focus.
Thanks, Robin. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. This is Becky Longenecker. I'm a wildlife biologist with the National Wildlife Refuge System, and I work out of the regional office. I'm going to talk through a couple of slides that cover our focus for 2020 and give you some specific ways that you or your partners can get involved. So just to recap what we were working on this past winter, we spent some time revising our pilot survey protocol based on the lessons that we learned during our pilot field season from the fellows and also from our partners who implemented it for us. And so we now have a revised version of the survey protocol that is posted on our website, and you can access that at the link that's shown on your screen there. It's publicly available for anyone to download and use. Also this winter, we had an ARD email that was sent to all of the ARDs in the Fish and Wildlife Service, and was also sent to the state directors within the frosted elfin range. And that email was to give folks an update on our progress with the species and to encourage people to continue participating in the survey effort. And we also held a call with our partners, including states and other organizations, to update them on what we found in 2019 during the surveys, and again to encourage folks to continue assisting with surveys and conservation work. Next. So that brings us to present day. So for spring and summer of 2020, we have already begun bringing on some at-risk species fellows to assist us with more frosted elfin surveys and also at-risk species work in general. And so I'm sure, as you're aware, we are feeling the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and so our surveys have been put on hold temporarily, and it's unclear when we'll be able to resume them. So for the time being, the fellows are completing remote assessments of frosted elfin sites, which are really contributing to our understanding of the current species status, and also are putting us in a really good position to direct our field survey efforts to the most promising places whenever we get the okay to go back to the field, whether it's this year or next year. And so also in support of the at-risk fellows, we've begun to convene our local survey coordination teams, just like we did last year, which forms a really nice local nexus for the fellows to connect with service and state biologists to give them guidance in the field. So for 2020, our hope was to conduct surveys range-wide and fill in some of the gaps that we didn't get to last year. And so we had prioritized the following kinds of sites for survey this year. First was sites that we visited in 2019 and that we found them to have habitat present, meaning the host plant was present, but there were few or maybe no butterflies were observed. So that's the first priority. The second kind of site that we want to get to is those historic sites that we don't have any current information on, so sites that have not been visited in the last 10 years. So again, depending on how this COVID situation ends up playing out, we may or may not be able to execute these surveys as planned this year, but anything that we can't complete this year, we will make it a priority to get to next year. And then lastly, one additional area that we want to help out with is to assist with genetic studies, specifically relating to the Arceus subspecies in South Carolina. Next. Okay, so just to talk a little bit more about the at-risk species conservation fellows and their work. So this slide kind of shows our original vision for the program this year. And so, as I've mentioned, we may need to make some adjustments this year based on the COVID-19 pandemic. But even if that's the case, I think it's helpful for everyone to just see and understand a little bit more about our overall vision and approach with this program. So our intention with the Fellows Program is to provide a highly skilled and nimble seasonal workforce that can assist with priority at-risk species projects across a variety of land ownership types. So our plan for this year was to bring on 16 fellows hired through the American Conservation Experience, and they were to be stationed at 8 refuges that are spread throughout the Northeast. Next. And so we'd like them to be able to provide direct assistance to states, national wildlife refuges, or other partners on priority at-risk projects. And our experience last year was that this was a really effective model of providing this workforce that could be really flexible about where they worked and who they worked with. So they were able to accomplish a lot of survey work and other support on state land or on private land or on federal land. And so for this year, we'd like to continue our frosted elfin surveys and expand, like I mentioned, into some areas where we have some gaps in our current survey data, particularly Virginia and South Carolina. Next. So lastly, just wanted to give you some ideas for how you can help if you want to get more involved with this species. So the first suggestion is to conduct surveys or encourage your partners to conduct surveys. And we really need surveys, again, in as many areas as possible. So we had a very strong effort in 2019, and a lot of great work was done, but there are still some gaps that need to be filled in order for us to be in a strong position to finish the species status assessment in a couple of years. And so even if a site was surveyed recently, as recently as last year, it's very helpful to have a second year of data to confirm what was found during the first year. And also, according to our population ranking criteria, which Robin mentioned earlier, we need 2 years of data to confirm that a site was actually extirpated. Next. Another way that you can help is to coordinate with your partners to spread the word to them and encourage them to conduct surveys using our standardized protocol and to participate in conservation work. Next. It would also be great for folks to continue engaging with state counterparts to direct funding as available towards surveys or direct habitat management and restoration. Next. And then lastly, the actual management of habitat is a priority. So in areas where we know we have populations, it's great to improve the habitat, and we can share resources and some guidance on how to do that. And direct habitat restoration also to create new subpopulations where they don't exist would also further improve the viability of the species. Next. All right, so I think I'm going to turn it over to Steve now for discussion of the survey protocol.
Thanks, Becky. Next slide, please. Okay, so my name is Steve Fuller. I work with our Science Applications Program in Region 1, formerly Region 5. And I've worked pretty closely with frosted elfin and had a hand in the development of this protocol. So the main objectives of the survey protocol were, first and foremost, to document frosted elfin presence and probable absence. The second objective was to obtain an index of relative abundance of populations. Third, to get some measurement of the extent of habitat and habitat quality. And lastly, a hope to create a correlation between abundance and some of the habitat metrics that we measured. Next. So we developed 3 standard operating procedures. There are three phases to the survey protocol. The first and earliest in the season is the preliminary site evaluation, which is really just intended to determine whether or not habitat is even still present on a site. In many cases, historical sites have been paved over or built upon and no longer contain habitat. The second operating procedure describes the marking of the habitat patch and counting the butterflies within that patch. And the third operating procedure is a rapid habitat assessment. And I just wanted to let you know that we're also developing a fourth operating procedure, which entails black light surveys of the larvae of frosted elfins. And we think this approach holds great promise, perhaps the best promise to detect the species in new locations. So the survey protocols are intended to be implemented in their order, earliest in the season with one, and as soon as the butterflies emerge with the second operating procedure, and once the populations have been counted, then proceeding to the habitat assessment. And the larval surveys would occur latest. Next. So there are 3 data sheets currently represented in the protocol, A, B, and C, which correspond to standard operating procedures 1, 2, and 3. The data can be entered in an Excel workbook or through Survey 1, 2, 3. We'll provide you information about how to access those 2 data entry tools later on in the webinar. Next slide. So some of the anticipated benefits of the surveys are that we identify sites that are no longer suitable and therefore reduce uncertainty about the historic and current range. Then we can confirm the sites that merit for future survey work and also find restoration opportunities, because remember, we're documenting habitat conditions on the site in part with the intention to identify good opportunities. Next slide. Regarding the timing, it's best to get started early in the season before the host plants, blue lupin, and the indigo species have emerged from their winter dormancy. A site visit may not be necessary early on for the preliminary site evaluation if the site is already well known or if it has recently been visited. Remember, the preliminary site evaluation is intended to just confirm that there's habitat on the site and that it's worth conducting a butterfly and habitat survey later in the season. Next slide. So for the preliminary site evaluation, again, that's recorded on data sheet A, which is available in the protocol. The data sheets are intended to be largely self-explanatory. They have instructions at each phase written right on the sheet. This particular phase, the preliminary site evaluation, requires obtaining permission to access the land, describing the access to improve future repeatability of the surveys. We're recording coordinates in WGS 84 to the 6th digit for latitude and longitude. And this form also asks if there have been prior surveys for elfins on the site. But in the end, it just requests a recommendation for whether or not the site should be surveyed for frosted elfin. Next slide. So once we've confirmed the site is valid for future survey work, of course, you need to be up to speed on the species identification. And I can't cover all of that here because it's quite detailed. There are a number of lookalike species. I do recommend using Jeffrey Glassberg's book, Butterfly Through Binoculars. There are many other really good sources, but this one in particular has some pictures of the lookalike species that are conveniently organized. From the key species are hoary elfin, Henry's elfin, brown elfin, and pine elfin. In the top left in this slide is the frosted elfin. Next, number 2 on the top right is hoary elfin. Number 3 in the middle left is Henry's elfin. Number 4 on the middle right is brown elfin. And on the bottom left, you have a pine elfin. The one on the bottom right is a hair streak and really not a lookalike. Next slide. So the frosted elfin has a number of key features, but again, we're not going to cover that in detail here. Next slide. Now on to the second standard operating procedure. This one covers how to mark out a host plant patch and then conduct a butterfly count within it. We're only using standard operating procedure 2 if we answered yes, meaning yes, there's habitat present in the first standard operating procedure. So having completed the first protocol, next step is to define where to actually conduct the butterfly counts. Next, you proceed with the counts. We recommend doing at least 3 counts, 4 to 7 days apart. The intention is that we not only get some replication and ensure that we get detection using multiple counts, but we also capture the beginning, the peak of the butterfly flight and the tail. The initiation of the flight period varies from mid-February, the furthest south in Florida, to late May, the furthest north in New England. So annually, the timing can vary by 2 to 3 weeks depending on how spring unfolds and how warm it is early in the season. And the length of the flight period can vary as well, from 2 to 6 weeks. If it's very warm and consistently warm and sunny throughout, it can really be shortened to several weeks. When the weather is cooler or more variable, it can be stretched out as long as 6 or even 8 weeks. Next slide. So in order to establish the count route, it's going to be marked each year. It's key to ensure that the host plants are starting to emerge before you attempt to delineate the area. And the survey route will have a fixed starting and end point shown in the light blue circles in the diagram, a fixed starting and end point. And then you'll have a visual understanding and mapping of the patch perimeter, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the count paths can vary between the fixed endpoints. Next slide. So the way you would move through once you've marked the beginning and end point is to begin at the starting point, visualize a counting path that passes by the most dense areas of the host plant. You would walk at a slow but steady pace and tally the butterflies without stopping. We recommend using a handheld counter or an observer to help tally the butterflies. Next slide. So the survey should only be conducted under optimal conditions, generally meaning a temperature between 65 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit when it's not raining or and the vegetation isn't wet. Wind speeds less than 20 miles per hour. And if the temperature is less than 70 degrees Fahrenheit, then it really needs to be sunny with very little or no wind. These temperature parameters, while they might vary slightly from region to region, there's usually a pretty clear line related to temperature and sun that controls when the butterflies become active, because they're dependent on solar energy in order to have a high enough metabolism to even fly. And you can have a marginal temperature and see no activity, and have the clouds part and immediately have butterfly activity. So it's really crucial to pay attention to that, and it often corresponds to time of day, often between 10 and 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Next slide. So for the butterfly counting, data sheet B, the top half contains the observer and the event information. The event information is important because, remember, you'll be repeating the counting methodology 3 times throughout the brood for each site. This also contains environmental data. The environmental information is important to confirm that the survey actually happened within the parameters, and that's important to understand from the perspective of measuring detection probabilities. We want that information to be present in the data set. Next slide. On the bottom half of data sheet B, you have the actual count data that are obtained by walking through the host plant patch from the start point to the end point. Verification data using one of several different methods, including a photograph. We want to know how you confirm the actual butterfly identification. And then last, there's information about the patch location, which you really only need to complete on the first pass. Next slide. Okay, so here we'll move on to the rapid habitat assessment, which you can conduct ideally after you have surveyed the adult butterfly population 3 times using the SOP2. The purpose of the survey is to gather a rapid assessment of the quality and abundance of the habitat, and the value of it is that it can tell us how important the site is, and there are actually parameters that are measured here that can feed directly into our ranking of the populations and used to inform a decision about listing. This can also tell us where the site stands with regard to management and potentially inform what kind of prescription or treatment we might use in the future. Next slide. So the method includes a measurement of habitat area, which requires a delineation of the patch. If you recall, for SOP2, I just kind of quickly referenced a visual delineation of the patch so that you could mark the beginning and end point. But here we're actually going to do that a little bit more with a bit more precision. Next, you measure vegetation cover area. Third, you document host plant species information. And last, we take several measures of the host plant abundance. Next slide. So how do we define the patch? This can be tricky in the field because the plant populations, one, you can't necessarily see all of the plants at once. They may all not have emerged yet. They change throughout time, and they have very indefinite shape. And so it's we just tried to set up a couple of rules to help guide you. So on the left, what we want to do is not try to capture every single plant. You're never going to be able to do that. You know, there can be plants hidden in the vegetation, and don't worry, you don't need to get every single plant. We want the shape to be convex, and we want it to include most of the plants, the greatest density of plants, but again, not try and reach out to every outlier. On the right, we're showing that if we tried to reach out and get every single plant, we may skew the amount of empty space that's present in there, and that will interfere with our ability to get a rough density estimate. We also don't want to have a jagged shape that can skew the empty space the other way and also throw off a density estimate. Next slide. So once we've got an understanding of how we want to delineate the patch, we need to document that delineation. So on site, you could use a smartphone. An application like Google Earth actually contains the ability to draw a line and save it, or snap a picture of your screen. You could also use, and this is what we recommend, a handheld GPS device with a fairly high degree of accuracy to take a walk around the perimeter of the patch. Or back in the office, you could use GIS and aerial photo interpretation to draw a line around the site. At the end of the delineation, really all we're after is an estimate of the habitat area, and there's just a simple line to enter that on data sheet C. Next slide. Next, we look at cover data. These are visual estimates only. It's intended to be a pretty quick estimate, but what we want to get a handle on is the relative proportion of the different structural layers of the habitat. So you look at the degree of canopy cover or shading for each of 4 different cover classes. 1, the canopy, and then 2nd, shrub layer, 3rd, the herbaceous layer, and last, the ground cover. And again, you're just trying to classify the site in one of 4 cover class categories on datasheet C. Next slide. We are also documenting the host plant species data. It's fairly straightforward. With lupine, there's generally only 1 species, blue lupine, Lupinus perennis, that is in use by frosted elfin butterflies. But there are several species of Baptisia that are also potential host plants, and we'd like to see those documented. Of course, we're only documenting we're documenting all of the host plants present, but we'd also like to know which is dominant on the site. Next slide. Okay, and last but not least, the challenging task of quickly documenting host plant abundance. Measuring host plant abundance has been a challenge to plant ecologists for a long time. So we tried to develop some approaches that are intuitive and give us a quick snapshot of the site, of the species on the site. So the first approach is to use a visual density estimate just by comparing the spread of the plants on the ground to a series of pictures that are described in the protocol. So just as an example, the picture on the right in this slide, A, shows pretty densely clustered host plants. So if it looks very densely clustered on the ground, you would choose A. All the way down to the last, E, a very sparse spread of plants. So this has now been tried by folks in the field last year and seems to work pretty well. We were able to get pretty consistent results across the fellows that use this method. Next slide. The second method is an approach that we came up with specifically for this survey, the walking density estimates. And this tries to capture the visual experience of actually walking through a host plant patch. Your ability to move through the patch smoothly without stepping on plants is determined by the density of the plant. So here, different walking experiences are described. For example, A, it's impossible to avoid stepping on plants. C, your feet are less than a yard from the nearest plant as you meander through the patch. Or E, you're often at least a few or several yards from the nearest plant. So again, just a really quick estimate based on the proximity of plants as you move through the patch. Next slide. And we also are taking account of the host plants, which when combined with the estimate of area can give us a density estimate. This is actually very challenging to get a count of the host plants. In some locations, we're dealing with very small patches, but in other locations, we're dealing with populations that are spread over many acres, and at that point, it becomes very difficult to count abundance. Also, the size of the plants makes it challenging. Which plants should you count and which should you not count? The number of germinating plants could change throughout the survey season and really skew your estimate. So we're recommending only counting adult plants, those that are larger than, say, a milk jug, or ones that have a flowering stem as an indicator of being well established. Sometimes it won't be able to be feasible to differentiate individual plants. They'll form a continuous cover. So we've described several ways of estimating the number of plants within areas of continuous cover. At the end, all of this count information ends up in some very large categories of abundance classes. So that's it for the habitat assessment. Next slide. So just to recap, standard operating procedure 1 is a one-time evaluation, and it tells us whether or not we should proceed with the butterfly and habitat surveys. Second one, SOP 2, is a repeated butterfly count with a minimum of 3. SOP 3 is a one-time assessment of the habitat patch conducted toward the end of the flight period, and not shown is the soon-to-come SOP 4, which is for blacklight larval surveys. So again, this is, collectively this tells us not only about the site, but the larger collection of information gives us good information about the overall species viability. Next slide. Of course, you'll have questions about the collection and submission of the data. I can't go through all of the details of that now, but I want to make it clear that the PDF form has been translated to an Excel workbook, which can be used to enter data directly from the field paper sheets into Excel and sent into us to be compiled. We also have a Survey 123 application, which is our preferred approach and also the preferred approach of folks that have worked in the field. It's very convenient to use, and the data upload instantly, and you don't need to worry about some of the GPS fields. So both of these tools are available. Next slide. If you visit our Northeast website and go to Frosted Elfin, there's a link shown at the top of the page here, and it's very clear on that page how to access the survey protocol and become registered to participate in the survey. The reason we're asking folks to register is that it helps us get a handle on where the surveys are being conducted across the species range, but also lets us get a jump on getting you access into Survey 123 and set up with a password, et cetera. And we really recommend going to the site and registering if you'd like to participate in the survey, because we can provide you support that way. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Bridget. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. This is Bridget McDonald, and I'm a public affairs specialist based in the Hadley Regional Office. So in parallel to all this great work, External Affairs has been supporting communication needs for Frosted Elfin on two fronts. First and foremost is internal, focusing on sharing information with our staff and our implementation partners. And the second front is external, so trying to get Frosted Elfin on everyone else's radar. So internally, we've really been supporting engagement primarily by helping to develop and maintain the Frosted Elfin webpage that's been mentioned a few times, by distributing information, and by promoting webinars like this one. On the external front, in 2019, we really focused on taking advantage of the great photo opportunities in the field season to increase visibility for the species and for the survey by pitching stories to media throughout the species range. And we were really pleased to see that the pickup was broad and diverse. You can see by the names of the media outlets that are listed on the left here, that the Frosted Elfin really had pretty wide appeal. So you had outlets like Food and Wine, Public Radio, Associated Press, a lot of different types of media outlets. And the map on the right shows the locations of those outlets, which were pretty widespread throughout the species range. So we hope this means a lot of different people were exposed to stories about this butterfly. So we also focused on telling our own stories on our Medium blog website to highlight partner contributions. And as you can see from the list of stories on the left, a lot of those stories highlighted non-traditional partners. So Department of Defense, Army National Guard, a brewery down in Florida, and the Federal Aviation Administration. So in addition to publishing these stories on our blog, we leveraged our social media and partner platforms to really try and strengthen relationships and grow support for this work. And we have some indication that it's working. So our most recent story, which was published in February, focuses on how FAA regulations create an opportunity to support frosted elfin at Atlantic City International Airport, motivated in part by the service's increasing focus on this species. So the story describes how FAA biologist Mike Denisi advocated for a less aggressive mowing regime in the marginal areas of the airport to support frosted elfin habitat. He also revived frosted elfin surveys, which had taken place at the airport from 2003 to 2015 in partnership with the New Jersey Pinelands Commission after our staff reached out. And before we published the story on Medium, it was actually distributed internally within FAA and was very well received. Mike was actually asked to give a presentation on the frosted elfin work at FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. this June at an annual forum for their environmental specialists. So that chain of events is a really good example of what we hope comes out of this, that outreach can help amplify proactive conservation efforts that can be replicated in other places and sometimes with non-traditional partners. So we really want to continue highlighting the great partnerships and great stories of conservation related to this species. So if you have any ideas, feel free to email me, and you can see my email address there on the screen. And back to Robin.
Thanks, Bridget. So in summary, we need your help. We have some time since we do not need to make a listing recommendation until 2023. And this is a wide-ranging species with many potential partners. And we're committed to exploring a wide variety of approaches. Like Bridget just mentioned, we're really interested in working with anyone who would like to help with this species. So on this slide, you can see the contacts for the primary frosted elfin team members. And if we can't answer your question, we will definitely be able to put you in contact with the appropriate person that can. So again, thank you so much for tuning in today and for your interest in the frosted elfin.